Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys primarily about the GSSR. But first, I really wanted to go through just kind of New Year's overall with you guys and what you can expect coming up here in the coming days on NA. And we are expecting a dev diary. I do expect the devs will talk about some of this stuff. They'll probably put out a news post, but I do think the dev diary will maybe cover some other things. So it is what it is, but just basically a TLDR of things is, you can expect the normal stuff that you guys get every single year from New Year's. Obviously, you're going to have Rasputin coming in as our New Year's servant. There is a social media campaign that should be associated with it. I believe that may already be out. We are getting a new New Year's attire mystic code. It's actually a very nice one. Gives NP damage up and NP gain. Gives basically 10% charge with overcharge, so definitely a nice one there. And basically gives debuff immunity and a crit start. So not the most powerful mystic code there, but definitely a nice one, and you can see it definitely looks quite well. We're basically going to be getting new panel missions again with some obviously command codes and stuff. Definitely interesting, especially with the innovator ear here, giving you the the human trait, not the man attribute. And again, you're going to get panel missions basically that give you these rewards. You can see you get some nice stuff, including a grail out of that. And essentially, the Da Vinci Workshop is going to be getting an upgrade as well. That's going to be allowing you to kind of increase the amount of embers that you guys can trade for. Again, some other stuff coming back, and you should have a limited time exchange here for the New Year's lucky bag that will include a bond grail in it. So definitely some nice stuff there. And essentially, like just allowing you to be able to trade for a lot of the stuff in the Mana Prism shop. We did have some game updates happen at this time, including the adjustment to the 4-star rate, but I believe this has already happened on NA. We are going to be getting new master missions that kind of just give you some free quartz. That's definitely nice. And basically, there are some other campaigns here to give you guys, again, more mana prisms, teapots, you name it. There's also going to be a 3-time super and great success chance whenever you level servants. Basically 0 AP for all main story quests until Avalon Lefay, and essentially just kind of extending the expiration day, but I believe it may have already been extended as they anticipated this to have occurred for part 2 of Lost Belt 7. Essentially here you're going to have basically half cost Ember Gathering and Training Field daily quest, which is definitely nice, a new start dash campaign and a comeback login bonus, and a limited time sort of New Year's My Room background. So basically the big thing that we're going to be coming on to here is again going to be the GSSR. That's the whole reason I'm making the video for you guys. Just wanted to give you guys a brief TLDR there of all the anniversary stuff. Now, not anniversary, New Year's. When it comes to this GSSR, it's going to be an interesting one because it has 20 different pools to choose from. And you guys can see they are going to be divided up quite a bit of different ways here. I will talk about that as we go through. You can only use paid quartz in order to get the GSSR. What that means, if you're unfamiliar and you've never purchased quartz before, is that whenever you buy a pack of quartz in FGO, a portion of it is paid, and then there is bonus quartz that comes with it. That bonus quartz is considered to be free quartz, not paid quartz. So whenever you purchase the correct amount for the actual GSSR, make sure that you're purchasing the right amount of paid quartz. You can see it'll break it down for you when you highlight each pack so that you understand. And again, that's going to be how you're going to be able to get your GSSR. You will get a grail for this in your present box after you've rolled it. It's not going to appear during the GSSR or anything. And you will only be able to pick one of these 20 pools to roll from. You cannot roll like once on each of them. It is literally just pick one, and that is your only one that you're going to get. But it is guaranteed to get you an SSR. Not necessarily the one you want, but it will get you one from the pool that you choose. So, as you guys can see, it breaks it down in various different ways. Basically, single target and AoE for every single class. Though it does get a little bit wonky as we get down here to the extra classes. There's a couple ways that you can choose to think about this. If you're a newer player, for instance, just kind of getting bodies to help you out in a class that you're missing can be really good. There may also be the ability to target sort of meta supports. Again, units like, say, Castoria, or maybe even Koyanskaya, maybe even Oberon as well, are definitely an option. But keep in mind that it is just a chance to get them. So you can go after them. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. And I do think there are some better choices than others in terms of that. But just keep in mind that you may not get exactly what you want. So just be prepared for basically the worst in case that happens. And that's one of the ways I want to tell you guys to kind of think about this is whenever you look at a pool, don't necessarily look at it just, like with rose tinted glasses and seeing the unit that you want. Assume instead like that you're going to get the worst and ask yourself, can you live with getting the worst possible option here, or will that deeply upset you? It's one of the ways I usually like to think about this because I try to approach this from a worst possible scenario outcome, and then that usually helps me out a ton. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going over every single unit. I've done that before in the past, but I feel like I have a lot of unit analysis out there for a lot of these units. If you're really curious about them, you can kind of go see. We're going to talk a little bit about each pool and kind of where I think there's some value and where I think there maybe is some like things that you might want to watch out for. So as we kind of go through here, I'm going to say the other way to approach it, and one of the questions I always get asked is basically twofold. The first is, should you go after a unit that you maybe don't have, or should you go after a higher NP level of a unit that you already do have? These are difficult questions. It depends on you as the individual and how you like to run your account. It's difficult for me to answer it, and usually whenever someone asks me this, I start by asking them questions about what it is that they want and what it is, again, that they can live with. So therefore, that should help you if you start to, again, sort of look inward and ask yourself what you can do, rather than wondering necessarily what the correct answer is. The truth of the matter is, in FGO, there is no real correct answer. There's no like, oh my God, I got this unit and not this unit, therefore I'm screwed. Instead, it's more, now you have another opportunity because you got this other unit. I personally, especially if I'm a more free-to-play oriented person, depending on things, I usually like to have more options. But there are some people that do instead say, hey, no, I'm going to hyper fixate on a couple of key units for my account. I can't say that's a bad way to play. It certainly helps you out in more challenging content. So it's up to you to determine how you want to choose to go about this. Do you want that higher NP level, or would you prefer having some fun new character to play around with and be able to develop and level up? I do think there's some merit as well to getting the new character. Not only does it afford you new options, but it's also going to get you more milestones and things like that to achieve. So you will be able to get more beneficial rewards potentially by getting more units. You just won't necessarily have as robust of a unit to be able to take down a higher level node necessarily if you were to go after, say, an additional NP level. So that is something, again, to consider for your own account. All right. Now with that all kind of out of the way, we can begin to talk about each and every individual pool here. So as we start out, we have the single target offensive NPs for Sabers. This first pool here is interesting, at least to me, because it definitely has at least a pseudo meta support here in Nira Bride. I think she's a really strong unit. I do think she's very flexible. She can operate as your single target damage dealer, but she can also be sort of, again, that support. She's really good at facilitating looping comps and things like that. She also has the Sky trait. It's one of the reasons I really like her. Benienma herself here can also be a little bit supportive. She's got buff removal resistance that really helps out the party. And you have the Trung sisters here that are really, really strong as well. So for Art's single targets, you're doing very, very strong there. Musashi herself just still has the top damage amongst all single target Sabers. She will just absolutely carve through like a knife through butter. And Okida herself is a really good solo artist. I do think your odd men out here are going to be Astolfo and Sigurd. They're not bad units, but they're maybe not going to be everybody's desired pick. So it's just up to you to determine, again, is this something that you want? And is this something you're willing to go after? I do think there's some value here, but keep in mind it is a wide pool with basically 7 different units in this one particular one. As we look to the AoE Saber, I do think there's also some potential here. You've got Void Shiki, which a lot of people don't realize nowadays, especially on JP, will actually outdamage Muramasa in terms of like 3-turn potential. Void Shiki's come a long way, gotten a lot of upgrades. You've got Muramasa there, though, that is just consistently strong, consistently good, very hard to stop, very good in challenge content. And then you've got sort of both Oki-Tan, Saber, and Charlemagne here that are kind of two sides of the same coin. They are both Black Grail looping quick units. And then you end up having Ibuki as sort of your AoE buster charger. Now, I do think your odd man out here is going to be Arthur, unfortunately. He has gotten some upgrades, but he's still lacking. He still needs some love. Again, I do think he's probably going to be the one that most people would be sort of upset about if they got him. So ask yourself if you can get it. I do believe in the future, JP will kind of bring him into the fold, but that may happen, you know, at a undisclosed date way in the future, or it may happen tomorrow. We just don't know. It'll just kind of depend on when they decide to actually pull the trigger, and it may be related to story at that. Looking at the Archer single target offensive NPs here, this is kind of funny because, again, Super Ryan doesn't actually have an offensive NP, so this is actually a lie. And basically, he's not a single target in that regard either. So it is what it is, but the fact that he is here, I'm going to say, is really, really good. He basically is a strong unit. He's one of the best things that you could pick up right here. Same thing with Squirtoria. I do believe that her NP damage could be a lot better, but essentially the way she is, and she actually has an upgrade coming here on an A over this next year that's going to give her 30% charge. She is phenomenal at boss killing and depriving the boss of their NP. Moriarty himself, still a fairly good unit. I actually think this is a fairly good pool to roll because there's just not a whole lot of like variance in it. You only have the 3 units. It's a very small pool, and all the units are fairly good. Again, Moriarty here probably being the weakest, and he's still being a 50% charging buster single target that has evil niche. Just really, really solid for him. The AoE Archer offensive NP here. This is a weird one to me because I do think we have some upcoming archers that are strong, including like Durga, that would end up challenging a little bit Jarcher here. Now, Jarcher is still a really, really solid looper. Her refund is not the issue. It's always been her damage output, but damage output's usually one of the easiest things to solve. So if you have like Castoria or really any art support, she can work with very little due to how good her refund is. As long as you have something like a Black Grail or something to slap on her, she can still do good damage. Gil and Ishtar are both in amazing spots right now. Sei is probably in the weirdest spot out of the 3 units, or sorry, out of the 4 units here. I don't think she's bad by any means, and if you do find her niches to be in play, she can actually pump some good damage for you. But that's usually what it requires. So to me, she's kind of the more niche pick here. I don't think this is a bad pool. I do think every single one of these can be used effectively, but I do think Sei is probably your odd man out at the moment. For our Lancer single targets and really our Lancer AoE, do denote that they did include Melisson in both of these. This is food for thought for you guys if you want to maybe roll the dice on the smaller pool being the single targets here, or the wider pool maybe for some of the other AoEs like Breedomart, who is newer, but maybe some of you guys didn't roll, but you kind of low-key wanted. There's always that choice here for how you go about this. I do think both these pools have some potential, and I'm going to say this, I don't believe there's actually a bad unit in either of these pools. What do I mean? I mean that Tamamo Lancer would have been your bad unit in the offensive single target Lancer pool. However, she has gotten an upgrade that has allowed her to actually function in a Koyanskaya system. So I think she's in a lot better spot now. She still drastically needs an NP interlude in order to keep pace. So she's definitely still the weakest unit here. But I do believe she's in a much better spot than she used to be. Again, Shisho still lacks charge a little bit, but they did resolve her carding performance issue on JP now. Brynhildr has just kind of always been solid, and Melisson is both AoE and single target, and sort of like the one that if you get her, you kind of won this GSSR in terms of like, she's just going to be your Swiss Army knife in terms of your Lancers. For AoEs, we have Eris. She's definitely in a much better spot thanks to her NP interlude. Again, Ryoma here, I don't think he's bad, but I think a lot of people don't really value him too much. He's actually really good in the arts variant of the Invincible comp. Burrito Mart herself is actually still kind of tame. She did get a much needed upgrade here on JP, and I think she's doing a lot better for it. But Quick still kind of has its issues, so it just is what it is. Again, Melisson as an AoE, definitely strong, and Roma has just always been strong, assuming you have the Buster support systems for him to be good. For the Rider single target offensive NPs here, and again, I'm going to assume this is more of a fandom issue and that's actually support / offensive NP, but essentially, basically what you're looking at here is that there are an interesting and eclectic group of riders. So Maid Alter doesn't have any charge at the moment, but her damage output is still really, really solid. I do think she is a unit that probably a lot of people would avoid at the current moment in time. I hope that they do upgrade her in that regard, but I don't think she's bad or unusable by any means, and I do think her card performance is a lot better than most people realize. With regards to Constantine is another like interesting one where he was kind of widely regarded to be one of the worst SSRs in the game when he was added, but they've actually, on JP given him another upgrade, and it actually really helped him out. He's quite a bit better now in challenge scenarios. I'm not going to say you need to have him or anything like that, but he is definitely a lot more usable. He's not nearly the dud that he kind of was before. I do think it really, really helped him. So at that point, I'm going to say he's definitely an interesting unit to roll and something that you can have a lot of fun with now. Reigns herself, she's a 50% charger. She is one of the best at just facilitating a looper's damage in terms of just adding raw attack. She's not Oberon level, but she is still way up there. She doesn't have any sort of aspect, so she doesn't care what card type you are. And that's really, really a nice thing for her. I do like her in that degree, and I think she's one of those, again, if you're looking for a nice meta pickup, she could kind of be a good option for you here. I'm not going to say this is the best one to roll, but I do like the fact that this pool is at least small, so your chances of, again, getting something wildly random just very, very low. With the AoE NP here, we definitely have some interesting ones. We have Ivan, who is the sort of current Buster leader here, but we do have Iskandar, and Iskandar has come a long way. He's definitely a little bit more operable at this point in time. And we basically end up with our arts units over here with Bakin and Da Vinci. Now, both Bakin and Da Vinci, I think, are actually in a very good spot. Da Vinci is way more supportive to the party. Really good refund, but very low in damage output. Bakin, a little bit better in damage output, but a little bit lower in terms of party support. So it's kind of a pick your choice for which one you would want there. But again, both of them are someone you can operate with and very, very solid. I think they are definitely good pickups. Taking a look at the caster one here. So this is single target offensive and support NP, as you can see. Basically, this is our one of our widest pools here. It's a 6-unit pool, and there's definitely some issues with it. However, the thing I'm going to say is if you are a new player and you are really craving one of those meta units, this is a phenomenal pool to roll. And the reason I say that is because not only do you have an option for Castoria, who has just recently gone away again, but you also have Scotty here for the quick systems and Merlin here for both Buster systems and overall survivability and challenge content, and even Miss Crane, who can act as a pseudo sort of plug suit option for you. From there, you have two at least decently strong single target casters, both Okuni and Ilya. So I think you kind of can't lose if you're a newer player and you roll this. You're going to get either a rare single target caster that can be difficult to get your hands on, or again, a support caster that is one of the things that you probably crave. I think, honest to God here, the worst pickup for a new player is probably Miss Crane, because they're going to struggle to actually have the capacity to use her properly, and she's really going to have more of a niche in challenge scenarios rather than just generalized farming and stuff like that. Still, again, if you're a more veteran player, I think this is a keep away. You probably already have a bunch of these units, and this is not something you really want to roll. For the caster AoE department here, we do have some interesting ones. Basically, Umu caster, still a very strong option. She doesn't work perfectly in the Koyanskaya system, but at least now with the 5th pin being out on JP, she's better for it, as she has the ability to double up her 3rd skill finally. The other options here, you have, again, AoE buff removal resistance with Murasaki, which is definitely a really nice thing to have in your account. That's going to stop enemy units from buff stripping you. And you do have Da Vinci, which has always done very good damage still, even though she doesn't have the best of refund. She still is a 50% charger. She can kind of brute force herself to 3-turning. So I do think these options are good, but keep in mind you have Ace/Tonal Eco coming out this year that is also a really, really good AoE caster. So it's up to you to determine if you want to roll for for anniversary coming up this next year, or if you want to hold off for, like, say, something like summer. Again, up to you, but that is something to consider when looking at that pool of units. For your assassin single targets, this is another interesting one here. You have Kama, who's a 50% charging single target assassin. That's an amazing pickup. You have King Hassan, who is, I'm not going to say unkillable, but very difficult to bring down and buster centric. And you have MHX, who a lot of people would probably consider to be the worst one here, who actually ends up dealing more damage than Kama in a lot of circumstances. So yeah, she doesn't have the charge capacity. Her kit's a little wonky, but she does good damage. So at the end of the day, I actually think this is another really good pool to roll if you need the single target assassin. It's a very, very small pool, and every single one of these units is good to a degree. The AoE assassin pool here definitely leaves a little bit to be desired. This is a spicy one for 2 reasons. One, as of the recording of this video, Koyanskaya currently on rate up. Roll her right now instead if you can. It's probably safer. But admittedly, it's a GSSR. Maybe you don't have the currency. Maybe you don't have the money. It's totally fine. I understand. But at that point in time, I can say this one's going to be more difficult because you have an absolute dud here. I'm not going to say that Semiramis is unusable, but Semiramis has basically not gotten any love on the JP side of things. Her damage is very lackluster. If you were to get her, maybe you really like her as a character, that's perfectly fine, and you could still use her. But almost every other AoE assassin that you would get is probably better than her at the current point in time. It's sad that they have left her in this state. I really want them to upgrade her, but unfortunately, it is what it is. Shootin' still does solid damage, though she herself only has the 30% charge and has a 1-hit NP. I'm not going to say you can't 3-turn with her, but it's not pretty, so it's not going to be the best in terms of raw output. Meanwhile, Cleo, still actually really good for challenge content. She has at least got the 10% charge. She can brute force a 3-turn. Her biggest issue has been historically her Imperial privilege and whether or not it procs. There are ways around that, and again, I do think she could still be serviceable in that regard. Huyan Zhou here is actually a very solid quick AoE looper, but a lot of you guys are probably coming forward to say like the Valkyrie welfare, or you maybe have your eyes set on Tezcatlipoca coming out here with LB7 part 2. So at the end of the day, I'm just going to say this pool, not necessarily the best one to roll, even though some of you guys might really want the Koyanskaya here. Your Berserker single target offensive NP, honestly, I feel like both of these right here are great pickups. Kentoki's absolutely amazing for you guys. Hits like a Mack truck, has 50% charge, great at raid killing, boss killing, and just in general taking out a single enemy wave. MHXA, just really, really strong, very powerful NP, anti-good, so definitely a really, really nice niche to have for certain boss killing, though she doesn't have charge. However, Hijikata is probably your odd man out. He can be made to do a ton of damage since he has 1 HP meme sort of mechanics, but admittedly, this doesn't make him necessarily the best option, as it means you have to sacrifice him to get him down that low, or you have to risk his life by putting him on the line and letting him get beaten up. So I do think he's kind of the dud to pull here at the current point in time. Berserker AoE offensive NP. may be the best actual pool for people to roll on in this GSSR. Let me explain. We have had pools before where the AoE Berserkers were really strong. Allow me to go through every single one of these units. You have a very, very strong 30% charging, works in the Koyanskaya system Buster unit in Arjuna Altar. You have a 50% charging AoE Arts Berserker that does a metric ton of damage against the Earth niche. You have a very, very strong Black Grail looping quick based AoE Berserker. You have Mama Raiko, who I'm gonna leave till last. And you have Musashi Berserker, who now has had an NP interlude to even surpass Ibuki in damage, even though she doesn't have the charge as an AoE Arts Berserker. And you have Morgan Le Fay, who just has solid damage, anti-man trait, works very well in the Invincible system, and is a 50% Buster AoE. So you have a lot of really, really good options here. Your odd man out at the current point in time is Mama Raiko. She's actually the worst unit here currently. However, Mama Raiko this upcoming year on JP is about to get an upgrade that gives her 30% charge. So even if you get Mama Raiko, she's going to start working in the Koyanskaya system, and she has both anti-earth and sky trait on her third skill. So she's going to be very, very, very strong in certain scenarios. Sorry, yes, this year on an A. Thank you, chat. She had it on JP for the upcoming year is the way I was thinking about that. But yes, so she is going to be very, very, very good. And that's why I'm going to say there's no actual dud here. She's the current dud, but she's about to basically just get catapulted up into an echelon that is similar to Arjuna Altar. So you really can't go wrong by picking this. Even if you already maybe have one of these, you might get another fun variant to play with, or you might make your existing one even stronger. The biggest thing you want to watch out for here is if you already have NP5 of any of these units, but that can be said about any pool. So again, this one just has some of the strongest potential farming capability and potential like just overall usability that really I think every account can benefit from. Okay, so with that, we're done with the 7 base classes, and we can begin to talk about our extra classes here. So the extra classes, I said, get weird. We start out with single target offensive NP, we go to support NP, then quick AoE, arts AoE, and then Buster AoE 1 and Buster AoE 2. So let's start out with the single target ones. Now, this is another interesting one because actually we just had a buff on JP to Yang there. So basically every single one of these units is actually in a very good state. Even Super Bunyan has recently had a buff as they have tried to make her, even though she was a less popular character, better performance-wise in relation to someone like, say, Melt, who has just historically always been strong. So realistically here, there's no actual dud. Every single one of these units is good for the class that they are in. They're excellent boss killers. Most of them have charge already baked into their, actually I say most of them, all of them have charge baked into their kits now. So it's something that realistically you can use them very effectively. I'm not going to say you can't go wrong here, just that like there is a lot of potential here and none of these units are a bad unit or have like major glaring issues at the moment in time. So I do think this is a very, very solid one to roll if you're going after your extras, particularly if you need a single target unit. The support NP is an interesting one because there's a lot of variance in what these units do. You have a more meta challenge unit over here with Proto Merlin. You have Van Gogh, who's very crit oriented and very challenge oriented. That can be really, really nice. You have Bazette, who's the only true counter NP in the game. You have QSH, who's a solo expert, though admittedly you need to be very careful using him against anything that can buff strip, but that could be said same of Bazette. Holmes here is probably your worst candidate at the current point in time. He's still a fun unit to use. He buffs you offensively, and he's kind of one of the only units that gives you both defense and invuln pierce baked into his kit for the entire rest of the party. So he can make the entire party have those features, and it's definitely a nice thing, though admittedly he's probably got the most niche kit here. And then you have Himiko, who is just sort of Super Orion, but a little bit more supportive and in ruler form, making her very difficult to kill, but very crit-centric. So to me, this one is a nice pool. I do think it could be really good if you want one of these units to play with, but I'm also going to say there is some potential issue here, and it's just going to kind of sort of revolve around what it is that you kind of want for your account. Like, for instance, Proto Merlin is a very, very good pickup, but if you already feel like you're covered maybe by having someone like Merlin, you're not necessarily going to feel the need to grab her. Or, for instance, if you already have someone like, say, Bazette, you may just go like, oh, okay, maybe I don't need to roll here out of fear of like maybe getting another one, when the majority of her kit just kind of functions on having the first copy. Yes, you can get her stronger, but you may not see nearly as much value, especially if you can apply this to multiple of these units. So it's up to you to determine. I do think this can be another really, really good pool, but again, do you actually need it? I think that's the big question you need to ask yourself. And some of these you might just rather prefer trying to isolate on their own banner and getting them that way. The extra quick offensive NP is another interesting one, as we do have some actually very strong candidates here. I think historically your weakest one here was actually probably Voyager, but he's kind of come a long way himself. I do think, obviously, getting your hands on Summer Scotty is going to have a lot of value there, even if you already have the original, so that's definitely an excellent pickup. Karen is probably one of the least talked about strongest units in the game. A lot of people don't realize how strong she is offensively and how she is a Black Grail looper. She does have some issues with what you bring alongside her in terms of support and needing to be able to drain them of charge, but otherwise, you can kind of resolve that, and I do think she's a really, really strong pickup. Dantes himself, still really, really good, even though he's one of the game's earlier units. He is definitely still holding sort of his own at this point in time as an AoE Avenger. And Doman is just, I mean, strong. Doman has always kind of been this way for carding, critting, and charging and supporting the party, basically, especially if they're evil and chaotic. I do think that does make your two foreigners here kind of your odd people out. If you don't necessarily feel like you need a quick AoE foreigner, that may be your issue there. But I do think both Van Gogh and Voyager here basically can be, again, decent options for you. They're just maybe not necessarily the strongest in their class or somebody that you may feel like you need. They're not necessarily bad pickups, though, either. So again, the issue that you're going to see with a lot of these pools is just how wide they are and how many different options you're going to have here, and that you may not get the thing that you actually are gunning for. With regard to the extra AoE arts NP here, we definitely have some really strong candidates. I actually feel like everybody here is good. Every single one of them is solid. None of them really have glaring issues at the point in time. There are certainly things that I could point out that like maybe are an issue for the individual unit, but nothing that's like, oh my god, it absolutely has to get buffed right now. They're in a bad state. Again, even units like Moriarty that a lot of the community kind of derided, I actually think are probably, unjustly sort of criticized in that regard. Moriarty's still a very, very solid unit. A lot of people just kind of have a bias inherent towards maybe, some other neutral looping AoE arts unit. And it is what it is. I think it's just people naturally have a reason to criticize things, but I don't think that they're bad units by any stretch of the imagination. And again, I do think each one of these has great potential, and arts as a card type is very easy to support. So I think this is a very, very solid pool, depending on how your account is faring, and especially depending on what you need. Keep in mind, as we move towards Ordeal Call coming up here on NA, a lot of the focus is going to be on extra classes. So again, having some extra classes in your roster may be something you want to think about so that you have appropriate counters to, again, each one of those classes, and something that you might want to start working towards. As we look towards the Buster groups, at least you get a little bit smaller of a pool, but it's because they split them in half. It is not purely by class, as again, we have it divided basically with the alter egos and moon cancers, each on different sides. So it looks like the devs divided these two up just in an effort to kind of make it so that each one of them has something to offer people. I don't think there's necessarily like any super bad unit here, anything like that. I think some people would probably say like, oh, this unit is bad, that unit's bad. But I actually believe that most of them are in a pretty usable state. They don't necessarily have glaring issues, but they do have issues in some cases. Let's kind of talk about what that is. So Oki-Tan, definitely a strong unit, but you have Tiamat coming out this year that's going to outshine her and outdamage her. So that's going to be food for thought. You have Summer Bibi, who has always been niche and definitely been nice for what her niche is, but it's up to you to determine if that's something you need. Summer Abby, I think, has been derided for a long time. She's never been bad, but a lot of people just felt like she was underpowered, and I can't say that's an unfair criticism in certain degrees, so I do think it's something to consider. Koyanskaya here, especially Koyanskaya of Darkness, not your most meta of supports, but she's sort of a damage dealing slash again, supportive hybrid. I actually really like her. I use her quite a bit in a lot of my compositions, and she does sometimes operate as a replacement for Koyanskaya. So I do think she's still a very, very solid pickup, even though some people feel like she probably could use a buff. I think she's still actually in a really, really good spot, just given what her overall supportive characteristics are. Oberon himself, still sort of your damage king. He's the unit that a lot of people just wish they can get their hands on. He is the best unit for damage amplification in the entire game for general purpose. You do have other units that can maybe surpass him by a little bit if their niches are in play for what they can provide to the party. But otherwise, Oberon, he provides 70% charge to a singular unit and basically, again, 20% charge to the rest of the party. He doubles up any source of NP damage. He is absolutely a monster, and he is a good AoE pretender in his own right. So again, I think he's absolutely the breadwinner on this portion of the banner. Looking at the next one here, we have Amakusa. Amakusa does AoE buff strip very similar to Summer Abby. This is again why they've tried to, I think, buff Amakusa, is they kind of felt he was threatened by her. And to me, Amakusa actually does really good damage, just not in a conventional 3-turn. So if you're looking at one-shot damage, he's not too shabby. But if you're starting to look at, again, like over a 3-turn, he's going to fall off a little bit. I do think that makes him a little bit, kind of difficult to use, especially since his kit is somewhat wonky, but he's not a bad unit by any stretch of the imagination. Buntoria here is going to be sort of your card shuffler. That's actually one of her primary niches. She's a crit support, and she actually functions really well in certain circumstances, but you kind of need to understand how to use her, and you basically need to set her up to succeed. Her biggest issue right now at the current point in time is she doesn't really have the offensive NP damage that she kind of needs. Hopefully she'll get an NP interlude in the future, but this is something that, again, she has had a couple of buffs, so who knows when that will happen. I do think she's still a really, really fun unit, and good unit, though, if, again, you do set her up. Man, Mao Nobu is a unit where be careful who you made fun of in high school, as I like to say. Basically, a lot of people, when Mao Nobu came out, just tried to, take tier lists and put her at the bottom of them and, really, really deride her, say she was a terrible unit. Mao Nobu is now actually your strongest AoE Avenger and just kind of has been sitting there for a while. She works really, really well in the Koyanskaya system, and she is extremely strong. She's actually, again, if you get her when you were maybe aiming for, Arcuate or something here, don't look that gift horse in the mouth. She is still a very, very solid unit, especially for carding as well. And then you have King Protea, who can be a very, very fun unit to use in challenge content, but she's actually gotten a lot of buffs. People are still kind of sleeping on her. She's kind of in the same way as Amakusa, got a really wonky kit to use. It makes her difficult, but the more you understand about her and how to use her properly, the stronger she will shine. And I think, again, a lot of people are sleeping on her actual damage potential and how much she can pump out for you, especially in a challenge run as well. And then Arcuate herself here, just kind of 100% charging AoE Buster Queen here. Not necessarily the highest in terms of damage, not by any stretch of the imagination, but given the fact you can 3-turn with her with Black Grail, she's definitely come a long way, especially now with the 5th Append allowing her to work with a double Koyanskaya Oberon setup, not needing to take any sort of cooldown reduction or anything like that. She is definitely in a much, much better spot now on JP, and definitely a little bit of a monster in that regard. So again, I do think each one of these has their drawbacks for each of these two pools. They're not necessarily the best pick, especially if you're just kind of eyeing Oberon. I do think there's some potential here between Koyami and Oberon, and maybe too much for a lot of people to handle. I do think, again, if you also want the niche here on Summer BB, this cannot be the worst sort of pool to roll. But ultimately, just understand, remember, you have the choice to make between, hey, you know, like, do I roll this and can I accept what I'm going to get if it's not what I desire? That's something, again, each of you need to ask yourself. So overall, for these pools, I do think there's some really, really good ones. I think, like we said, some of the best ones are the smaller pools that just have tight-knit, sort of good units in them. But you do have some pretty crazy ones like the Berserker AoE that are, again, just amazing. Let me know what you guys think about each of these pools. Which one do you think is the strongest? Which one will you be rolling for? And who is your targeted unit in that pool? I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next one. Good luck on your GSSRs, and have a happy new year.